good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, good morning to those of you in the Central and Pacific time zones. Those who are watching from Israel, from Europe, we want to wish you a good evening. Well, we are living in what I would say are not only monumental times, but literally by the day monumental changes are happening. And we want to thank Major General Nadav Padan, who we've asked to give his assessment and analysis, not only of what's happened in Syria, but what the ramifications of the last week have been in Syria, what it will look like in terms of Israel, the rest of the world, the rest of the Middle East, as we are really entering uncharted times in modern history. And if we could turn it over to Major General Nadav Padan, I know that we are very, very anxious to hear, to learn, and try to understand the players, what's going on, the ramifications of what Israel's done in Syria.
So I would say that when people blame Israel for coordinating or initiate the revolution or the last changes in Syria, it's based on true story in a way, because it's really a result of the war against the Iranian proxies. The stability in Syria was very fragile. Since they're fighting for 10 years, there is an ongoing civil war in Syria that's been stabilized in a way after the agreement in 2020, led by the Russian and Turkey, that create kind of a three-land country in Syria, which divides Syria to the area of the Kurds at the east-north side, the Federation of North Syria, SDF, run by the Kurds and supported by the US, by the way. The center of Syria, the significant part of the heart of Syria, like 63% of Syria was the Islamic Syria run by Assad. And another spot that run by what left from ISIS and Al-Qaeda, what used to be Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria, and changed the name the Hayat Tahrir Sham. The same organization that actually initiated, ran the last maneuver to Damascus under the command of Jolani, that everybody learned his name for the last few days. On top of that, there were like small spots at the very south part of Syria that got the nickname the Operation Room of the South, run by different group of Commander Jabi, and another spot that held by the US at the triangle of border between Iraq, Jordan, and Syria, and another spot that took over by the Turkey at the north part of the border between Syria and Turkey. Now to speak about the existence of Russia at the main port. It used to be at the airport and the seaport of Syria, and Shia militia run by the Iranian, including Hezbollah itself, that was one of the leader of the fight before the stability that been launched, as I mentioned, by Russia and Turkey. This very fragile situation waited in a way for to cut the hands of the Iranian, the Shia, from getting involved. Once Israel defeated Hezbollah in Lebanon and created a situation that the Iranians are not fully strong to respond, but being focused in defending themselves, those forces, as I mentioned, run by Jolani from Hayat al-Tahrir, the former Al-Qaeda, ISIS kind of group, released their brakes, their stops, and they start maneuvering from the north, from the city of Haleb down to Damascus. At the beginning with resistance, and then as long as they move fast and south, the resistance got lower and lower and lower, and they took Damascus with very limited fight. Shoot here, shoot there, but not significant resistance of the Syrian army run by Assad. Assad himself and significant part of the officer that led the army and the state of Syria ran away. Assad to Russia, and around 3,000 officers to to Iraq, under the custody of the Shia militia there. The situation right now is very, very fragile. So the main question for Israel, is it good for us or bad? Because for one hand, it kind of blocked the influence of Iran close to our border. It cut the access between Iran through Iraq, through Syria to support the militia, Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they had a lot of assets in Syria, from missile factories to storages to training area. And I to the one that followed the videos that been released from Syria, you can get impression from the amount of pictures, flags of Iranian and Hezbollah at the main cities in Syria. There were storages and headquarters of Hezbollah in Iran in Hamed, in Hama, in Damascus. So it's not only embassies and kind of liaison offices that coordinate this access of supply, but also factories and areas that actually produce weapon, and specifically strategic weapon like accurate missiles and another stuff where everybody speaks today about the chemical weapon. As far as I believe, most of the chemical weapon were under the custody of Assad, and there were no chemical weapon under Hezbollah, as far as I know. But time will tell. I mean, we are exposing bit by bit the intelligence in Syria. What Israel responded was, we didn't want the strategic ascent of the military of Syria to get to the wrong hands, to the hands of terrorist group that can, find a way to use it against us. And since the collapse of Assad, we operate a draw operation we hold for the last 7 years, since the civil war in Syria became serious. And the idea is to destroy the strategic weapon before they get to the wrong hand. That's the idea of this plan. And that includes hundreds of targets, including the Air Force bases of Assad, with the jets and the helicopters, with the ballistic missiles, the research area. It's a nickname for chemical weapon storages and factories, okay? To the port, with the warboat and warship of Syria, and their radars and air defense. Israel in running right now the 7th wave of attack for the last 3 days, cutting bit by bit, layer after layer, those assets. And so far, generally speaking, 80% of the strategic asset of this military been destroyed. I don't know about any jet, helicopter, ballistic missiles, chemical weapon, and warship boat that are still functional on the land of Syria, and that's significantly important. More important than that is the elimination of the air defense system, which kind of allowed us to fly free right now over the sky of Syria to deal with Syria itself, or on the path to the cell circle of threat, meaning Iran, if I have to be clear. So the route, the path of flight for the Israeli Air Force from Israel to Iran right now is open. We spoke before about the ability of Iran to defend itself from air force strike from Israel after the last attack of Israel. So now it's even got worse. And if I have to take one step backward and look at from strategic perspective at a situation and ask, okay, we said that the Iranian are the one that's leading the Iranian axis, or the Eastern axis, or the axis of evil, whatever you want to call it. And they've been losing their proxies, start with the Palestinian Hamas and Islamic Jihad and continue with Hezbollah and now Syria, and the ability to recover through Syria, to use Syria as a path to support their proxies that need to recover, been cut. So what's going to be the strategic next move of the Iranian? So I don't know, but if I have to map the option, there is three main options in front of them. Actually, four. One is to give it up, which I won't believe. They're still holding their ideology and strategy to launch the idea of the Shia all over the Middle East for the beginning and then all over the world. So to fulfill this vision, they can either go to continue, declare, and put their effort right now to accelerate the nuclear ability of Iran. That could be one option. And being a nuclear weapon holder and change their position in the world in the Middle East. The second option is to take advantage of the changes at the White House and wait for Trump to get with them to some kind of agreement that could make sure that they are protected from challenging by the Western world, the US coalition or Israel or any other ally of the US, and under the radar or under the inspection of the Western world to continue with their effort to rebuild the proxies and go back to a position that they have influence in the Middle East. That's second option. And third option is to try to bypass and fight the access through Iraq, Yemen, and North Africa. I don't know if there is a decision right now in Iran. I truly believe that the wait for the middle of January to see and verify what's going on at the US and at the White House to make this decision. So we have kind of gray zone or little period of time that the wait for the leader of the Western world at the US to make a declaration to see where the wind taking them from the White House in Washington, D.C., and then, to my understanding, they'll make the decision. But generally speaking, those are the options. From the Israeli perspective, there is opportunity to deal with the Iranian, to take out the influence of Iran in the Middle East. We don't want to destroy Iran. We don't want to fight the Iranian people, but we want to make sure that the Iranian won't be able to challenge us again and to feed the proxies around us and the radical group and the terror group in the Middle East and unstabilize the situation. I think the next step from Israel is to, with the US, continue with the path of stabilization and peace agreement under the Abraham Accord. And the first target of this kind of effort will be the Saudi Arabian country. So if we can convince with the US, the Saudi Arabian to move forward with normalization and with peace agreement with Israel, that will be a significant strategic change at the Middle East and for Israel specifically. The next step will be to strengthen the relation that we have with the moderate Arab country and make sure that they'll keep the stability. And our main and first worry is the state of Jordan. You know that the state of Jordan are controlled by monarchs that representing the minority of the population of Jordan. Most of the Jordanian original people are so-called Palestinian, and the Hashemis family that running that they brought by the Britain during the 40s to control the state of Jordan, representing the minority. The challenge right now is because of the instability in Syria and because of the instability in Iraq and the amount of refugees inside Jordan and the pressure of Iran to support the Palestinian Judea and Samaria through the Jordan country, Jordan struggling with huge challenges. And for us, I mean, the Western world, again, the US, the Western European country, and Israel specifically, because we are sharing the longest border with them, is to help the Jordanian to keep the stability and to keep the regime stable. And when Israel described the situation in Syria a few weeks ago, we thought that Assad, with the support of Russia and Iran, is stable. And we have to be very careful with our strategic assumption about the stability in Jordan. So I've talked about continue with the Abraham Accord. I've talked about stability of our airlines and the moderate Arab country. And the third one is making sure that if there is kind of negotiation between Iran and the Western world, it will include the need and the strategic need of Israel, which is to prevent Iran from feeding the proxies around us and to make sure that they won't have a nuclear weapon. The last thing I want to say, which is kind of tactical thing, but they have to verify it. People around the world criticize Israel for maneuvering to Syria. Let's clear it up for a second. Israel didn't maneuver into Syria. We didn't run to the gap of 20 kilometers from Damascus or any far than the ceasefire agreement we signed with them in 74. The ceasefire agreement in 74 include kind of buffer zone. So there were like area between Syria and Israel that it was the last post for the Israeli forces from one side and the last post for the Syrian forces at the other side. This kind of buffer zone were very narrow at the south, at the area of Quneitra and South Quneitra, at the center of the border between the Israeli Golan Heights and the Syrian Golan Heights, and it's got a little bit wider toward the city of Khader, the north part of the Golan Heights at the border of Syria. Israel didn't cross these lines of ceasefire. We just get into the buffer zone, prevent the terror organization and the parties that fighting inside Syria from getting close to our border. And we declare from the very beginning that it's a temporary maneuver, that the goal of it is just to prevent those troops for getting close to our border. And as far as Syria creates certain amount of stability, we'll withdraw back to the other line of the ceasefire agreement. We never crossed the lines of ceasefire agreement. We did cross it with our strike, with our Air Force strike and with our naval strike at the naval port and the airports of Syria, the same kind of operation I mentioned before. And you know what is the biggest paradox? That the biggest criticism that criticized Israel for maneuvering into Syria was Turkey, that maneuver into Syria years ago and accelerate the maneuver the last few days. We have to understand that when it comes to Syria, Russia, Iran, Hezbollah, ISIS, Turkey, the US, Jordan and Israel, Lebanon have strategic different goals in the area. So, for example, the Turk want to prevent the Kurds from getting connected with the Kurd in Turkey. So they're trying to create kind of buffer zone between the SDF, the Federation of North Syria, that run by the Kurds, supported by the US, from connecting and creating kind of continuously with the Kurd that lives inside Turkey. The Russian want to control the port, the seaport. The Iranian want to control the seaport and the airport and create an access between Iraq and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel want to protect itself along the border. Jordan want to protect itself along the border and prevent refugees from getting into Jordan. And each one of the parties or the countries used different kind of allies inside Syria. Over the years, it depends on the context. So Turkey could cooperate with the FSA, the Free Army of Free Syrian Army, for a while, and they again coordinate with them and with the Sham Tahrir, that Ayat Tahrir Sham, to attack part of the Kurdish cities, and the day after they can fight them or strike against them and prevent them from coming close to the border between Syria and Turkey. So the complicity and the fragile situation in Syria is a huge challenge. Israel very smartly declared that we have no plans to take over part of Syria. We're wishing for Syria to be stable and for the people of Syria to have free democracy and to be able to bring back all the refugees from Europe and from all over the world. Ayat Tahrir Sham Julani, that give interview every few hours and been adopted by CNN and Sky and other, are declared that he have no claim in Israel for the time, but generally speaking, originally representing the ideology of ISIS, which say that the first step is to take Jerusalem and then Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia, the religious places for the Islam, and from there to spread all over the world. The difference between Jabhat al-Nusra and Ayat Tahrir Sham is Jabhat al-Nusra hold the ISIS perspective. They look for this Islamic ideology to be spread all over the world, and Ayat Tahrir Sham speaking about Syria, not about the world, which is kind of fake. To remind you, Jolani himself was a prisoner of the US in Iraq for almost a year as a terrorist. Okay, so it's really difficult to trust the player, and the situation is very fragile. Israel have to be strong and defend the border, and to wish for the party in Syria to find the way to stability. If I have to be to finish this very short, shallow brief, I would say, with a sparkle of optimistic light, if Syria will create stability, and this stability won't threat the border between Syria and Israel, that's going to be dramatic strategic change in the Middle East. And I'm wishing for it to happen. With the right strategic maneuver by the US and other, we can create it. I really believe in it, but it's very hard to predict right now. It's a very fragile period of time.
So I have a few questions for you, but I'd like to make sure that we understood what you said, because you shared with us an incredible amount in the last 20-some minutes. You shared that you have various factions, whether it's the Kurds in the north, the Druze in the south, whether it's the HTR, I can't pronounce it, so I'm going to refer to it as HTR, which is right now controlling the majority of the country, the crucial cities of Aleppo, Damascus. You have other groups. If HTR is successful, do you see them over the course of the next couple of years in their battles with the other Syrian groups, number one, getting military aid from Turkey, being supported by Syria's military aid from Turkey? Number two, do you see them being a threat to wipe out or take over either the Druze in the south or the Kurds in the north?
So I think that those parties had a lot to do with each other when they have a mutual enemy, Assad. When Assad is out, they become enemies of each other. So from that perspective, it's going to be a little bit worse before it's going to be better. If I have to predict how Syria going to look like the year to come, which is quite risky to do, I think that it's fair to assume that Syria will be divided to three different countries. So it's going to be the SDF, the Federation of North Syria, run by the Kurds, along the triple border between Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. They're going to be the center of Syria that's going to be controlled by Tahrir Sham, by those former kind of ISIS group, Islamic group. And they're going to be areas of the minority, which is the Alawis, the Druze, the Turks, along the shore, with access to the main land, to the main country, access between the main country to the ports, to Latakia, to the ports of Syria. That's my assumption. It makes sense that each one of them will have his own independency. But time will tell. The amount of actors here promise instability for the first few months, and each one will try to check what can he achieve, how can he better his positions, and that will create friction and instability. That's what we can see right now between Turkey and the Kurds, and between the FSA and Tahrir Sham at the center, and between them and the Druze and the Alawis at the center west side of the country. So it's really, really, really fragile and unstable kind of a platform. And just to wrap it up, I think it's going to be a little bit worse before it's going to be better. And the betterness will be the dividedness of Syria to those three strips or three independence-led Kurd, Muslim, and minorities.
You're saying if, as long as one group does not get control, in this case, radical Sunnis get control of the whole country, it actually is better for the world, for Israel, for stability.
I think if one will take over, and the only one that could take over it's the Ayat Tahrir Sham, which is the stronger force right now. That's promised a long civil war between them and the Turk, between them and the Alawis and the Druze, and so far. And I think that they're smart enough and exhausted enough from the civil war not to get into it for the next year. But they are not the only actors. There is, as I mentioned, outside influencer like Turkey, Russia, Iran, Israel, Jordan. So it's going to be a little bit worse till it will stabilize. And we can see that the first seed for those friction right now, as I mentioned, between FSA, SDF, and Ayat Tahrir Sham.
If the HTR, the Tahrir Sham, assuming they control the majority of the country, they're probably they're sworn enemies to Iran, to the Shia, to the Alawite, which is a branch of the Shia.
Yeah.
And we can assume, is this fair, that we can assume they're not going to cut a deal with the Iranians, allowing Iranian equipment to go through to Lebanon, use Syria as a path to Lebanon? Is that a fair assumption?
It's a reasonable assumption, but I must, worry us, remind ourselves that part of the actor knew how to play kind of love and hate games. So, for example, the Iranian cooperating with the Muslim Brotherhood at the Palestinian Authority, the Islamic Jihad and Hamas. For example, the Iranian used to play kind of love and hate game with Al-Qaeda. Once they arrested them, the other time they released them to fight inside Iraq and cooperate with them. Although they are radical Sunnah and from rigid religious perspective, they are pure enemies. So it's a bit more complicated than that, but your assumption are could find a source of hope from the fight they had the last several years with Hezbollah and with the Shia militia. So there is lots of love there, and it will be very, very complicated for the Iranian to play those kind of love and hate game with them. Although if you listen carefully to the declaration in Iran, you can start see that they try. They try to find a way to the heart and the minds of the new leadership of Hayat Tahrir Hashem. It's complicated, Steve. It's not going to be easy.
To go back to what's been done in the last few days by Israel, by the Israeli Air Force, I mean, from a point of view of accomplishing what they've accomplished, this is quite monumental. Meaning, if one were an expert in military aircraft and military maneuvers, what they've done in almost zero time is it's unfathomable.
It is amazing operation, amazing, not less than that. And to launch such a strike, you have to have years of gathering and organize intelligence and translate it to operational understanding. As I mentioned, it was an operation that been planned for years in Israel specifically for this kind of moment. That if the civil war in Syria will lead to the situation that Assad collapse, well, we have to prevent the access of those groups to the strategic weapon and asset of the army of Syria. And we planned it for years. You cannot, launch strike against more than 500 target like that in 2 days. It was well planned. There was a squadron in Israel that knew those plans and trained for it. And therefore, it was smooth, fast, and very, very accurate. And Israel show again to the Middle East the Israel ability. So you can blame us for not providing the intelligence for the collapse of Assad and not providing the intelligence for October 7, and said that Israel is not that good with strategic assumption, but we're amazing with operational ability and ability to connect between intelligence to operations. That's quite unique, and I don't think that there is another Western country that know how to do it as good as Israel.
The fact that Israel has removed those very dangerous chemical weapons, I'm not sure that the world community appreciates that, because those would not necessarily have been used against Israel. They could have been used in Europe, in America, anywhere. And the fact that some of the most dangerous weapons on earth have literally been removed, it's made the world a far safer place.
Oh, for sure. Steve, it's not a theoretical assumption. We know that Assad, the world know, the US know, and Israel know, that Assad used those chemical weapons against his own people, killed hundreds of Syrians with chemical weapon. It happened during the civil war. So it's not kind of a strategic weapon that waited for the moment at the storages of Syria. They actually use it. And the Western world and the reasonable part of the world have to clap for those kind of strike and for taking those kind of weapon from getting into the wrong hand. Just imagine that organization like ISIS have a a chemical weapon. It could be awful. Not for Israel, for Europe, for the US, for the free world.
So we have what you're sharing with us is, at least probably for the next number of months, maybe even the next number of years, the fragile instability will continue until there's some establishment of who controls which parts of Syria, and when people put down their arms and actually start rebuilding the country. The fact that we're seeing literally tens of thousands of Syrian refugees returning from Jordan, returning from Turkey, and I'm making the assumption that 95% of them, 99% of them, are Sunni Syrians looking to return home to lands that they've lived in for hundreds of years under the Ottomans, and through the Assad period. Mm-hmm. That in itself will create instability with that massive movement of people coming into the country.
No, not necessarily, Steve. Not all the Sunni are part of the radical Sunni that represent by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or by Jabhat al-Nusra at the time. Those are kind of ISIS radical Sunni. Most of the Sunni people that lives in Syria, to call them moderate, it's not necessarily the right title, but they're not part of those radical militant group. The people that used to live in the desert, at the city of the east, Dara, Sweda, the east side of Syria was poor people that barely have, food to put on the table. Cheaper and I would say lousy, sorry for the word, agricultures. People with small farm that fight to survive. They have no motivation to fight. They have no leader to take them to march toward the city of Damascus. So I guess they're gonna go back to the villages, go back to the city, and try to rebuild their life. That's going to be the first step. So it's going to be a huge challenge for the new state or the new leadership of Syria to make sure that they have food and they're not creating kind of a humanitarian crisis. And not only for Syria, it's for Syria and the rest of the world to support him and make sure that we are not creating kind of a humanitarian crisis there. But that's going to be the main challenge. They are not like well-trained forces or motivated forces. They truly exhausted. And speaking about exhaustedness, that's in a way as bad as it sounds, my hope that Kurd, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham forces and the other forces in the minority in Syria are exhausted from the civil war, and they have lack of motivation to keep on with this war. This could be a sparkle of light for stability. As bad as it sounds, but that's my belief.
One last question. In order that the IDF prevents the revolution and the fighting that's taking place in Syria from spilling over into Israel, into the Israeli Golan Heights, what kind of increase of troops will be required on the Syrian border, to prevent such a thing from happening?
So, right now there is a lot of forces at the Golan Heights because there is huge unknown. And the number of forces that's going to be needed at the Golan Heights really as a result of the stability. Once we'll see stability in front of us and we could, take reasonable risk, we will reduce the amount of forces along the border. But till then, we have to be strong enough to make sure that we don't have another October 7 at the Golan Heights.
So, wow. That means more soldiers necessary. We have.
Oh, definitely. I mean, just to give you a flavor or to put things at the right balance, we'll have to have more forces at the Golan Heights than in the border of Lebanon right now. Because at the border of Lebanon, we have an address. We know who is there. We hold it. There is enemy there. We have to be well prepared to welcome any attempt to challenge the ceasefire agreement or whatever. But we know who they are, where they are. Syria is in kind of dynamic situation. There is forces that moving from one side to another. Another militia that come close to the city of Quneitra just last night and move towards south later on the night after. So things are very dynamic right now in Syria, and therefore we cannot take risks.
How
We have
many
to have a lot of
kilometers?
troops there.
How many kilometers is Quneitra from the Israeli border?
Quneitra is on the border.
So,
The city of Quneitra fence is the same fence that marking the border between Syria and Israel.
so you've got now more and more forces from HTF coming towards the border. That's a
Yes.
very dangerous situation.
So far, they are not challenging us, honestly, but they are there, and we cannot take risks.
Thank you. Thank you for this analysis. Thank you for contextualizing everything for us. And obviously, we're going to be asking you many questions in the coming months because, as you said, it's a very dynamic, it's a very unstable situation there. But what we've seen that's been carried out, and it's very interesting. You mentioned that this has been something that was planned for years and years in the eventuality of the downfall of the Assad regime. In the way that it's been carried out almost flawlessly, this is the kind of thing that they'll write history books about. This is the kind of maneuver and, so to speak, protection of the world that they'll teach in military academies. And we're living through it on a daily level right now.
Oh, sure. Steve, we're at the gate of the holiday of light. And, we're dealing with huge darkness around us. And hopefully the light we provide for the Middle East, that there is the only democratic country in the Middle East, will provide not 8 days of light, but 8 generations of light at least. So that's our hope. And really, we are holding to the light, truly, as literally, I mean. And I'm at the end of the day optimistic. I think there is an opportunity for a strategic change in the Middle East here, and hopefully we're on the way.
Thank you, Major General Padan. We're very grateful. And we're actually watching events, observing events as they change by the day. Thank you very much for this analysis.
Sure. Thank you.